Good evening. Thank you for coming to this side event on ICTs and Climate Change, hosted by the International Telecommunication Union, OECD, and the Global E-Sustainability Initiative.
So I'm an elected official in the International Telecommunications Union, ITU, based in Geneva. ITU is the lead UN agency on information and communication technologies. So first of all, I'd like to, on behalf of ITU and our co-organizers of this event, the Global E-Sustainability Initiative, GeSI, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, to welcome you here. Thank you for coming. Many of you may not know very much about ITU, so just let me say a few words about ITU. ITU is the organization which regulates the use of the frequency spectrum on a global basis. We have an international treaty on that, which is updated regularly. Also regulates the use of the satellite orbit. And we assist developing countries with the development of ICTs and telecommunication networks in their countries. We issue the numbering system for telecommunication systems, mobiles and fixed networks. This is why every mobile phone and fixed telephone is a unique number throughout the world. And we develop global ICT standards to ensure international interoperability of telecommunication systems and networks. And we also put a lot of effort into fighting cyber crime. We have a lot of standards on cybersecurity, and also now we're doing a lot of work on climate change, which you'll hear more about from the panel. So, of course, many people predict that we need to have a really substantial reduction in emissions, suggestions of at least 40% by 2050 or even more, and that the time has passed where we can talk about incremental reductions of 5 to 10%. The only way we believe that you can achieve such a substantial reduction is through the application of ICTs in other industry sectors, because the sector itself doesn't produce too many emissions, but we believe that you can have substantial reduction in energy generation, transportation, buildings, waste disposal through the application of ICTs. And basically what we're saying is that we need to change from the high carbon physical infrastructure we have today to low carbon virtual infrastructure, building on the information society and smart technology, in other words, ICTs. ICTs, of course, have a lot of applications, such as virtual meetings to reduce travel, e-governance, e-health, smart grids. A lot of people are talking about now how much energy can be saved through bringing intelligence into the energy network, distribution network. And then what we call dematerialization. This is using electronic files instead of paper, downloading videos instead of buying DVDs, things like that. So ICTs can give us all this, while at the same time, of course, improving people's lives and bringing the benefits of the information society to people. Not everyone is benefiting at the moment. We know that many people in developing countries don't have these benefits. This is what we called bridging the digital divide, which is one of the main objectives of the ITU, to bring the information society to all the citizens of the world. And it's been suggested that there's a clear link between bridging the digital divide and combating climate change. Possibly a mechanism needs to be developed to encourage investment in ICTs in developing countries through giving some carbon credits. And maybe this is something that could be looked at in the future. I know it's probably too late now for Copenhagen, but in the future something like this perhaps could be looked at in the CDM. And of course we need to have better linkage between the different industry sectors, the telecommunications sector and the energy sector and the transportation sector. These have been traditionally separate sectors, different communities, but we need to bring them together so that we can really apply ICTs to the benefits of reducing total greenhouse gas emissions. And we believe that ITU has a big role to play there. We have 191 governments and members of the ITU, but unusually for a UN agency, we have over 700 private sector entities which are also ITU members. And so this public-private partnership, we believe, is very strong. And we're looking to collaborate with as many organizations as possible. We're doing that. And I hope events like this, where you see that the diversity we have in this panel we have this evening, shows that a lot of people are interested in pursuing this agenda, and that together we can be a very strong team. So we're looking to work with all interested parties, and we would like to encourage any delegates in the room from parties to emphasize the important role ICTs have to play in these negotiations. It's a bit disappointing that at the moment there's no mention of ICTs or even telecommunications anywhere in the negotiating text. So we'd very much like to see ICTs, telecommunication, listed as a sector. Currently those are listed, I think it's in non-paper 17, but maybe that's changed by now. So that's the message that we are hoping this evening will pass to you. And this is something that both the member states in ITU and the private sector entities in ITU feel very strongly that we need to pursue. So we're looking forward very much to the discussion this evening, and hope that this message will come over, and we'll be recording it. We have Telecom TV recording this, so the whole evening's proceedings will be up on the web for people to view in the future. So thank you very much, Toby.
One of the challenges that we have is that despite all of the work that's been undertaken in the ITU, all of the work we've undertaken at the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, where I work, all the interest in such things as green growth, that's the current buzz phrase. You know, we know that we have to get out of this crisis and out of the recession by having a different sort of growth path. There is still, as Malcolm, I think, very eloquently put it, there's still a disjunct, there's still not a joint between just the role of information and communication technologies and tackling the big problems in front of us. And I think one of the issues is that because information and communication technologies are so pervasive, they are everywhere, and we just don't think in many ways that if we just worked out better ways of using, for example, the 4 billion mobile phones or the 4 billion mobile phone subscribers to monitor and measure and to manage our environments, our own personal environments, our own environments in terms of what we do to make a living, the way that we organise our buildings, for example, this building, the way we organise the way we got to and from this building, we could actually manage the carbon footprint, we could tackle global warming much better. And I think it's that issue, as somebody's mentioned today, and I was talking to them, it's the oil and water problem. We've got two very, very important elements, but we don't quite manage to make them link. And I think that is an essential point for us to carry forward during these negotiations, that if we're going to talk about the future, if we're going to talk about smart applications, smart buildings, smart urban systems, smart transport, smart electricity production and distribution, smart manufacturing, smart anything, that is going to rely on a lot of distributed information technology, a lot of fancy software, not necessarily centralized. The whole beauty of information and communication technology is, of course, that it can be decentralized, that it can decentralize everything much, much more efficiently than in the past. So I'll leave you with 3 ideas. When we're talking about the way that information and communication technology impacts the environment, we usually try and break it up into different areas. And we think about the information and communication technology equipment itself, the fact that it uses electricity, the fact that when it's made it uses a lot of raw materials and rare materials. When it's disposed of and recycled, it needs a lot more, takes a lot more materials and energy as well. So we tend to think of that as one whole system that we can improve. The second level is, of course, all the applications, such things as I said before, smart applications. That is the area which is going to have the biggest impact, and the biggest impact in the future. How can we make our lives, the way we work and sleep and eat and do things, how can we make that more effective? Not necessarily by looking at our mobile phones or our meters or our smart equipment every single minute of the day, that would be terrible, but think of better ways of organising ourselves. And that's going to take major investments in ICTs. And thirdly, we need systemic changes. We need to think about how we reorganise ourselves, and again, it's information and communication technology. So that's 3 levels. And if you look at the way the 3 of the very major points which are underlying the negotiations which are going on at the moment, it's about mitigation. That's reducing impacts of us on on global warming and on climate change. Adaptation, that's picking up the pieces afterwards, and it's about technology and technology transfer, and obviously information and communication technology, they're key to those 3 areas. So I'll leave you with those 3 levels, the ICTs themselves, ICT applications and systemic change, and think about how we can make them be more obviously relevant to mitigation, adaptation and technology, just to name 3 out of the 6 items which are under consideration now.
GeSI is a global initiative, is a collaboration initiative bringing together service providers, suppliers. The ITU is a partner, the OECD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, but also NGOs like WWF or the Carbon Disclosure Project. It's a very unique organization in itself. It's a collaborative organization, a growing organization. Of course, is led by the industry, but we have on our board an NGO sitting together with us and helping us to drive the sustainable agenda. We are not a lobbying organization. We address our key issues, our material issues, and work together around those material issues. And of course, climate change is today the most relevant and material issue for the ICT sector. And in a result of that, we produced the Smart 2020 report last year. Meanwhile, it became very famous, a kind of landmark being used everywhere. As Toby said, this global study shows that the ICT sector alone can reduce 15% of the global emissions by reducing its own emissions and also by enabling other sectors to reduce their emissions. And this is a quite significant number because I cannot recognize any other sector or industry that can make such an offer in terms of the discussions on climate change. I used to say that the ICT sector is making an offer to reduce global emissions. And this offer is not being taken by the global negotiators, and that's difficult to understand. I would say that actually we don't need, as a sector, we don't need the global framework to progress. because we can progress alone and we can still make business alone. But with a global agreement, we can speed up the process. And that's what we need. We have done following the global agreement, we have done 3 national studies. One in Portugal, one in the US, and is coming out one in Germany in December. Just referring to the German one, I cannot disclose the figures, but in the German study we looked at what can the ICT sector do alone in Germany, and what can the ICT sector do if there is the political framework there. Very small things. And the result is that if there is the political framework, we can reduce 3 times more CO2 emissions in Germany than alone. And there is here a political responsibility that needs to be taken, not only in Germany, but also in Europe and globally. And so maybe I'm in a different position as here my colleagues in the panel. I sometimes allow myself to be a little bit provocative. And I think that the people here is being totally away from the reality. Totally away. We had a financial crisis that everybody knew that it was there, but nobody wanted to address it. And now we are in a big mess. And with the climate discussions, the same thing is happening. We need the people that is sitting in the power shares to take responsibility. And I don't think they are taking responsibility. And it is a shame that myself, leading an organization like this, from the private sector, comes up with this message. We need the people sitting here not to lose their time and get concrete solutions to tackle the climate. There is no solution to reduce the 2% or the 2 degrees, and that's the challenge that we have up to 2020. Without ICT, you will never get there. I repeat, without ICT, you'll never get there. In Germany, the German government set the target of reducing 40% of the global emission, of their emissions. Without ICT, the German government will not get the 40%. And if that's the case, and everybody knows about it, and there is evidence about it, so I ask myself what the people here is doing 2 weeks, the 2 previous weeks, and the 2 previous weeks in Bali, in Poznan, and so on and so on. It cannot continue like that. They are emitting too much. Actually, with ICT, they could emit much less. Maybe they should think about meeting virtually, and we should think about meeting virtually, so we avoid the problem that we are involved in. So my message is that to everybody here, which I much respect, I think maybe they have very good intentions, but those good intentions are not taking us anywhere. And my expectations from an industry perspective that we come to an agreement and that the ICT sector is part of that agreement, not because we want to be there and want to see there. I already mentioned that we still can do business and move forward in the current context. But with the legal framework, with an appropriate framework, we can do much more to make this world sustainable and to ensure a good future for the coming generations, for our children, and for the people that still wants to live in this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our 3 speakers. If I could now ask you to make your way down and ask the panel members to join us here. And please, the 3 speakers, feel free to continue to be provocative from the floor.
Will do.
Now I'm going to invite the panel members to make some short presentations. Try to keep to less than 5 minutes if you can, because we have quite a few people on the panel, so between 3 and 5 minutes maximum, if you can. And we'll follow the running order that's in front of you. So if we can please start with Mr. Daniel Torres.
I just wanted to well, first of all, to tell you we are here from the Spanish Secretariat of State for Telecommunications and the Information Society. I'm the director at the National Observatory for Telecommunications and the ICT sector, and I'm an advisor to the Secretary of State for Green IT issues. And after saying that, there's not much less to say, or at least not impossible to say something so clear and transparent as the things we have already listened to here on the table. So I think the messages from Graham and then Luis and then Malcolm cannot be more than only stressed and emphasized. We are all here for the same goal, for the same purpose. We want to achieve a very ambitious goal, which is green growth. Okay, we are talking about green growth, and I would say green growth for everybody. Beneath that ambitious goal of green growth, there is a number of issues that must be solved for many nations, many countries all around the world. We want everybody to grow, and if it's possible, to grow at the same time and with the same guarantees. We don't want anybody to get lost in the process of becoming green. And in that way, we want the process to becoming green to be a commitment from everybody at the same intensity. So how do we achieve this green growth goal, which is such an ambitious and long-term growth model? How do we make it compatible with the short-term goals as we all have in our governments and countries and economic sectors? Well, there is good news for everybody, and the good news is that there is a sector, there is an activity in itself that can help everybody, and that is the ICT sector, that is the ICT initiatives that are taking place all over our countries. The ICT sector is the sector, in capital letters, that can help any other sector in any other economic activity to be green tomorrow, to start being green today, and at the same time not giving up being sustainable and profitable today. And another piece of good news for everybody is that ICT make it possible for the small players to be competitive and being green in the same way as big players have always been. And this is good news not only for small players in developed countries, but also for whole emerging countries today. And that is something that for the first time ever there is a possibility to achieve thanks to this sector, thanks to ICT. We are all considering a lot of indicators. I work in for producing indicators every day, so maybe I could give you just a couple of them. We have studied in Spain, for example, that every time a taxpayer performs a tax declaration annually on the internet instead of making it personally or physically, every million declarations will save around 1 million carbon tons in carbon emissions. So, last year in Spain, almost 6 million people performed their tax declaration through the internet, thanks to a specific program within the National Program for the Development of the Information Society, what we call Plan Avanza, as you may know. The good thing about this plan in Spain is what we have found since it was put in place in 2006, is that it has changed a whole mindset in the Spanish society about the possibilities and the potential for growth, not only economic growth, but also social welfare and social growth, thanks to these technologies. So right now, we can say that, for example, in Spain, we have supported R&D projects, green projects, with more than $3 billion. The whole ICT development plan in Spain will have devoted up until next year, 2010, which is the last budget that has been approved by the government, by the parliament two weeks ago. The total amount will have been more than $12 billion, and that's a huge success for all the Spanish society. We can tell. And the government, more importantly, our colleagues before were talking about the importance of regulation for these goals. the government is preparing a whole comprehensive law for the economic sustainable growth in Spain, and has issued a number of laws allowing this green revolution in Spain to take place. So only just to finish, just to say just one more thing, to say that we will be honored in Spain to hold the Spanish presidency of the European Union beginning January next year. And as you may know, there is a whole set of preparations with our colleagues in the OECD, in the European Union, in the ITU, regarding this presidency. So one of the main goals for the Spanish presidency regarding the ICT sector is to what we call the Granada strategy, and it's called the Granada strategy because it will take place in the city of Granada in Spain, next year. So one of the main goals for the Granada strategy will be to achieve a goal for the whole of Europe, which is to make the European economy be distinguishable all around the world for being a green, innovation-based economy. So that's one of the main leitmotifs of our activity in that sense. And on my side, just to extend this ambitious goal about being green and innovative, not only to Europe, not only to the European Commission or the European Union, but of course to all of our countries. We really think we can make it together, and hope we'll be together in this process. So thank you very much.
My name is Atsushi Taketani, Director of the Device Industry Strategy Division of the Ministry of Economy, Japanese government. First, I'd like to thank for the organizer for having me here, and I'm really looking forward to participating in this event to discuss green IT. And especially today, I'd like to introduce to you what we do in Japan to disseminate the idea of green IT. And there are 2 or 3 topics I'd like to present for the future discussion. First, I'd like to briefly what we do in Japan to disseminate the idea of green IT. And I have some materials back there. So if you are interested, please take one of my presentation materials. And first, we established in Japan, we established what is called a Green IT Promotion Council. And that council was made up of academia or industry groups or the research institute on their work as a venue to promote a green IT. So whenever we have some issues to solve, I have a close communication with Green IT Promotion Council people. And needless to say, we need input from the industry. So that council works as a venue to discuss issues related to with green IT. The role of the government is always under discussion, and in Japan, our activity focuses on 3 parts. First is the research and development, and we are working to promote research and development to have the better technology on the green IT. And secondly, we work to have the good measurement system. And I'll touch on this issue later as the future challenges, but people always say green IT can contribute a lot to the climate change issue. Of course, many organizations or industry groups show the calculation, but this type of calculation is sometimes, the way of calculation is a little bit different. So we should have the good measurement, and finally, we need to have the good standardized system of the measurement. So we are working on it. And finally, Japanese government is really working hard to disseminate the energy efficient product or the technology. Recently, as the one part of the economic stimulus package of Japan, Japanese government started a system called eco-point system. And when consumers buy energy efficient products like energy efficient TV or refrigerator or air conditioner, Japanese government, simply put, Japanese government subsidize of consumption of these goods. So that policy does not only help economic recovery or economic growth, but also helps to raise the awareness of the consumers of having more energy efficient goods or technology. So I think that's the one good example how policy can work to stimulate or distribute the energy related consumption. And needless to say, international cooperation is the key in the policy, and we have the good working relations with the U.S. government, and right now we are working with the U.S. government to set up the good indicator of the energy efficiency of data center. And also, we have the good communication with the European Commission, and before coming here, I stayed in Brussels and discussed how we should advance the measurement of the green IT with the European Commission people. So I think that kind of discussion would lead to the fruitful idea. And we are located in Asia, so needless to say, we are really working hard with Asian countries. In October last month, we started the first Asia Green IT Forum with our 8 Asian country partners. So we exchange information on what we are doing, and in the future, I hope this type of forum could be the good venue to discuss what we should do in the Asia region. Finally, I'd like to touch upon the challenges we have. First, a measurement issue. Right now, many organizations are working to standardize the measurement, but my first impression, this is my totally personal one, but these activities are sometimes fragmented, and many organizations and many industry groups are working on their issues separately. So we need to have some integrated activity in measurement issue. That's my first impression. And secondly, and finally, we need to have the good incentive system for the IT-related people. For example, sometimes Japanese producers always complain about the relation between the climate change and the economic growth. For example, imagine 2 producers of air conditioners. Company A produces more energy efficient air conditioners, and the company B does not. People always buy more energy efficient air conditioners if the price is the same. So as a result, company A can sell better, and as a result, company A produces more CO2. Under the cap and trade system, for example, company A should buy, credits if such production. As a result of such production, their emission goes over the emission limits. But as a whole society, the company A contributes more. So, in a sense, this is kind of contradictory situation. So we need to devise a way how to assess the contribution to the climate change more properly, and we need to reward the system to company A in this example. And the company A is not only one actor. For example, many subcontractors are working behind company A. For example, the producer can make lighter material in the air conditioner, and that may produce a better air conditioner in this case. So we need to reward any actor who actively involves in the supply chain. So finally, we need to devise to reward each actor in the supply chain. And so in that sense, we need to find a good formula to reward each actor in the supply chain. That's quite a challenge. And right now, the lower energy cost is the only way to reward each actor in the supply chain, but is that enough or not? So that's something we need to discuss. Some people think carbon market is a good way to solve this issue, but as a consumer, if I buy energy efficient air conditioner, I cannot really get good reward from the carbon market because my contribution is really small. So we need to devise a way to solve this issue. That's something we need to work on. So I'm really looking forward to discuss these issues with my our friends here. Thanks a lot.
Although I came from Geneva, I've been invited tonight to talk on behalf of the region. In basis of the symposium that took place in Quito, Ecuador, in my country, in the month of July, precisely on the subjects of ITCs and climate change. So I would like to share with you some of a summary of the conclusions, of the main conclusions of that symposium, since it has been my endeavor tonight. First of all, as you know, the region is home of many of the most biodiverse countries and systems. So one of the major issues during these talks in Ecuador was the problem of deforestation in the region, which contributes around 17% of the GHG emissions. That brings to us one of the first conclusions of that symposium, that was that the bridging of the digital divide and bridging the benefits of ICTs to all citizens are fundamental to tackling climate change. So equitable access and ensuring connectivity to schools, rural areas, health facilities, etc., are vital in a region like Latin America. In that sense, it was considered that the global efforts to combat climate change on one side should not be impede the economic and social growth of developing countries. So all factors should be linked one with another. Other main point was the recognition that the ICT sector must limit his own carbon footprint. In that sense, as many other things have been shared, and I'm sure it has been shared in many other forums, the increase of use of renewable energy supplies and green purchasing policies are essential for a good solution. And also, of course, the acknowledgement that the e-waste from the ICT products is a growing concern and problem, and it was mentioned here in the introductory remarks. Consequently, the reuse and the recycling of the ITCs products also needs to be encouraged all over. Also, in the region was mentioning that the ICTs can play a key role as an enabling technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in other sectors, not only in the ICTs related arenas. And that way, the dematerialization enables to ICTs to replace travel and reduce GHG emissions, for example, or conduce to what is called the zero carbon technologies, which is important to find and develop the best use of renewable energy sources and clean energy. For that is one of the main goals in the Latin American regions. However, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, the main concern is the necessity to preserving the rainforests, the jungles, the savannas, the oceans, and all the natural reserves and biodiversity that prevails in the region. That was especially mentioned, and that is what I consider was the most original outcome of that meeting, the linkage between what is called the reduction of the digital divide and what is called the environmental divide. In that sense, it was mentioning the necessity to encourage innovative proposals and solutions to this gap. One of them has been hinted here for Mr. Johnson. That will be, for example, the encouragement of use of clean and new technologies by industrialized countries, or even by private companies in less developing countries, in exchange of carbon credits, for example. This will be a question to discuss the methods and the manners, but I think that will be one original manner to promote and arrive to what was mentioned in the Quito meeting of a climate justice, equitable equation between the digital divide and the environmental divide. And also, as a second point, I would like to make echo of what was mentioned also from Mr. Johnson here, the necessity that in the discussions and in the documents that will be discussed and considered and approved in Copenhagen, a mention or reference to the ICTs and the relationship with the climate change should be raised. I think that is one of the missing points in the discussion right now, and I think it will be the occasion to reflect on this and to share with all the other actors regarding the increasing importance that they have the technologies and the climate change sector. And of course, we are open here to discuss other future points on these matters.
I am Deputy Vice President in the energy sector from a Spanish company called Telven, Abengoa Telven. We have it's a global IT company, and we provide critical solutions for critical markets like energy, transportation, environment, agriculture, etc. And every day we have relations with the critical sectors in the energy market, like utilities, for example. And today, all the utilities are involved in what we call the smart grid solutions. What is a smart grid solutions? A smart grid solution is just the use of ICT in the daily operation for the utility in order to reduce the generation peaks and in order to have a better management of the demand response. But what is the problem? The problem is that we need information. We need critical information for making the best daily operation in the energy sector. So better information management will give us better efficiency. So the two key words we see in all the energy sector today is information and efficiency. Better information will be better efficiency. And of course, better efficiency will make a reduction in the global warming effects, of course. For example, in the Scandinavian markets, all the utilities like Vattenfall in Sweden or Fortum in Finland are changing their grids, their networks, in order to introduce new ICT technologies in order to provide more information to the end customers. I mean, 1 year before, all the utilities in the Scandinavian market have information about the energy demanded by the end customer just one time per year, one yearly, and based on estimations. You can imagine. Sweden with 8 million people, Finland 5 million people, two of the most important countries in information and communication technologies, didn't know the energy consumed by the end customers 1 or 2 years early. What are they doing? They are changing all the networks, all the operation in their networks. They are installing, implementing new technologies for providing new metering technologies in order to get information on real time about the energy consumed by the end customers, and also what is maybe more important, giving information to the end customer in order to provide the end customer with a tool in order to make a demand management, a demand side management. What does it mean? Does it mean that information and communication technologies have a a critical role, a very important role in the climate change, because all the energy managed by the end customer, by you and me, need to be known in order to reduce the demand side management and in order to reduce the generations. So, just to take an example from Shakespeare and the most famous sentence maybe from Shakespeare, to be or not to be, that's the question. I could say that to know or not to know, that's the difference. That's the difference. If you don't have information about the energy you are consuming, you cannot manage it. If the utility have no real information about what the end customer are using and what they need, they cannot do nothing. So this is critical. So the information and communication technologies in the utility sector, electricity, water, gas, etc., will be the most important change in the coming years for the climate change. So summarizing, just memorize the 2 or 3 words, important words: information, efficiency, global warming effects. That's the key. Thank you.
I'm also a member from NTT Japan, Japan's main telecommunications company. It is my great pleasure to be here. Today I would like to talk about the importance of standardizing the methodology for evaluating the environmental impact and the reduction effects in sectors other than the ICT sector by using ICTs. As everyone knows, global warming has become a serious problem for the human race. At the same time, ICT's use is rapidly increasing all over the world. However, ICTs can address the global warming problem, and that is, ICTs are expected to reduce their own energy consumption and also mitigate greenhouse gas emissions through their use in other sectors. According to the ITUT website on ICTs and climate change, the ICT sector itself contributes to around 2% of total GHG emissions. However, ICTs have the potential to reduce the remaining 98% of emissions produced in other sectors. Unfortunately, there are few corporations or organizations that assess the reduction of GHG emissions by using ICTs. Consequently, the ICT potential to reduce the 80% of emissions produced in other sectors is not widely recognized because there are no standardized methodologies for quantitatively evaluating the GHG reduction of other sectors by using ICTs. People rarely recognize ICT's potential. And therefore, it is necessary to standardize an internationally agreed method of calculating 2 elements. The first is the energy usage and the carbon impact arising from the life cycles of ICTs. And the second is the mitigation that can be achieved through dematerialization and by substituting ICTs for fossil-fueled activities such as travel and transport. We discussed the basic concept of methodology at the focus group on ICTs and climate change until March of this year. At this focus group, more than 20 other organizations and companies and delegates participated. And now, since April of this year, the new study group 5 on environment and climate change has been aiming to standardize an environmental assessment method. For the standardization of the methodologies for quantitatively evaluating environmental impact, we should aim for fairness, transparency, validity, and acceptability for other sectors. Therefore, it is necessary to standardize the criteria for evaluating ICT impact system boundaries, that is preconditions and functional units for analysis, and so on. We should discuss these issues and make detailed rules for standardizing. Finally, I would like to talk about the advantage of standardizing an environmental assessment method. It is expected to bring various advantages for both the global environment and business, because it will become possible to compare the environmental contributions of corporations quantitatively by using an internationally agreed method. Consequently, the positive aspects of using ICTs will become better known around the world. It will enable us to reduce the global environmental load. Furthermore, business developing environmental solutions using ICTs will become more active internationally because ICT using corporations will be able to utilize the method to maximize their own CO2 reduction activities. When the standardization of a quantitative environmental assessment method is completed, not only conventional factors such as price, cost, performance, and efficiency will be considered as evaluation criteria of ICT equipment and services. Energy consumption or CO2 emission reduction effects by introducing ICTs will be additional factors. As a result, it will become clear that the ICT sector has great potential to reduce the GHG emissions in other sectors. That is the main advantage of standardizing an environmental assessment method. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Charting the evolution of our company, we started off as telecoms specialists. We then became telecoms and media specialists when broadcasting, content and networks were converging. We then become ICT consultants when the IT layer, packet technology, etc., underpinned that whole thing. And now our private and public sector clients are leading us to be energy consultants because of the role of ICT that we've heard so much about and the need to be carbon and green. So I guess some of the early comments from the panel here were somewhat puzzling to me to hear that the negotiations around us aren't automatically including the ICT element, given the pressures that we've been challenged by our telecoms and ICT clients to address. So that just makes this kind of that more interesting a discussion. Next challenge is how to say something new and different, given where I am on the pecking order here. But however, the points that we'd like to make is that we believe that ICT is one of the few investments, maybe the only one that can enable development, clean growth and carbon reduction. Clean growth in many ways, the management of renewable energy, general power management, agriculture, farm management, improved technology, telecoms-based training, education, healthcare, mobile payments, just so many different ways that ICT can enable growth because we enable services, and we can enable those services in new areas by, technology can leapfrog to the new ICT, which means we can deliver those services for less carbon than otherwise would have been. And I think that really is the key, one of the key takeaways from this. And also, we've heard about smart grids. ICT is absolutely critical to the management of inherently unstable energy inputs, i.e. renewables, and try doing that without sophisticated IT technology. So just building on that, our view is that the only way developed and developing countries can balance long-term economic growth and sustainability is to invest a significant proportion of public and private sector budgets in advanced technologies, in particular ICT systems, and kind of quite closely aligned with the previous comments here. To achieve this goal, we need a sound business model to foster investment in state-of-the-art technology. One of the ideas that we've been thinking through is the extension of the CDMs to include ICT in the quantitative case for that, which I'll just touch on a little bit later. And we would invite interested parties, governments, industry players, organisations, to join together to design that new business model. I think one of the early speakers talked about, that the private sector, can do this alone, but jointly together with a global political framework, it can be accelerated. We can save a lot of pain and hassle by doing that in a coordinated way. Obviously, since 2000, developed countries have managed to grow substantially, while CO2 emissions have stabilised in the USA and Europe. Environmental concern has driven private companies to build sound business cases for the introduction of low-carbon technologies. But generally, we see existing business plans looking at rate of return on investment first and carbon and green benefits second. However, we've identified a range of ICT investments with paybacks of less than 12 months, which have reduced CO2 emissions by what we calculate as being 1 ton for anything between $200 and $500 US. And we've quoted that in some of the material we've left at the back. There's internal initiatives at BT in the UK and Cisco's telepresence, where there's really well-crafted evidence to show how that demonstrates ICT can improve the things that we're talking about, and then the application of that within the UK public sector, local authorities, and the health service. There's demonstrated benefits from that as well. However, developing countries face additional challenges as far as ICT is concerned. There's a lack of existing infrastructure on which to build the new services and advanced technologies. The proportion of people living in rural areas reduces the economies of density and makes services more expensive to offer in those areas. And thirdly, the nature of the emerging economies limits synergies and cost savings anyway. So these challenges can make business cases more difficult to balance and might deter investment in advanced ICT technologies, hence reinforcing the importance of developing this appropriate and alternative business model to foster the investment. The Kyoto Protocol established the Clean Development Mechanism as a way to stimulate sustainable development and emission reductions. And we believe that an appropriate way forward would be to consider widening the scope of the Kyoto Clean Development Mechanism, which at present is primarily used for clean energy projects, to include the knock-on and indirect benefits of the ICT investment. And this is partly through, I think we've mentioned, the carbon emission reduction certificates, that if we could find a way of valuing the benefits within that can be treated as quasi-equity for investments that could make the difference between a positive business case and a negative business case. To the tune of, we estimate 10 to 20% improvement in the upside of those benefits cases, which could make an enormous difference to making things happen and helping new clean growth and carbon reduction at the same time.
So at Cisco, we're not only using technology to reduce our own carbon footprint, which, by the way, we're reducing by 25% by 2012, and we're well on track to meet that. But we're using it to enable smart grids, to enable smart cities, to enable much more smart transport. And I have fantastic case studies and examples of where we're doing this all over the world that we can discuss perhaps after another time. But at Cisco, we very much believe that if it can be connected to the network or to the internet, then it can and it will be green and greener. And one example of this is, and we can discuss this, one example of this is our telepresence system, which was mentioned, which is a very advanced video conferencing system that provides ultra-high definition video conferencing to people all over the world. Cisco installed this, started with telepresence 2 years ago. And over the 2 years, we have reduced our own corporate travel, or our own travel, over 50%. We have saved millions in travel costs, but most importantly, we have reduced our own carbon footprint just by reducing that travel by 8%, which is helping to meet our 25% goal by 2012. Most importantly, with telepresence, we're very proud to be the technology sponsor to COP15. Cisco, along with the Danish Ministry and UNFCCC, will be creating a global climate change meeting platform. And that platform will connect 20 Danish embassies, 5 UN locations, and about 80 Cisco offices all over the world to the Bella Center in Copenhagen. So for all of you delegates who are accredited, you can, if you are planning to travel to Copenhagen, you can meet with your peers in order to support negotiations. You can meet with your press to update them on the negotiations, and you can also prepare the negotiations prior to Copenhagen by meeting face-to-face, by exchanging documents, and by not having to travel. So we hope that by doing this, we will somehow reduce the carbon footprint so that you won't have to actually go to Copenhagen, or that your peers or our press will not have to travel to Copenhagen, but you can meet them virtually in a very advanced environment with ultra-high definition video conferencing.
I wanted to take a slightly different take on this because we have to start at the beginning. And so we are here in Barcelona, we are approaching the meeting in Copenhagen, and Copenhagen has to deliver a political agreement that does 4 things. It has to deliver clear and ambitious reduction targets from developed countries. It has to clear the way for developing country action. It has to provide adequate financing from industrialized countries to help developing countries adapt to the inevitable and to limit growth of their emissions. And it has to provide clarity on the fair governance of funds. And in the discussion of the previous speakers, I was particularly struck by how different the worlds are between climate change and ICT. The different groups speak different languages, work in a different environment. But I wanted to pick up Malcolm's point about developing countries because this is a crunch issue in Copenhagen, and it's a crunch issue for ICTs. And I'm going to give you an example that will shock you. In 2006, I had the honor of working in Kenya for a conference of the parties that was held in Nairobi. $70,000 was put on the table to have 10 megabits of bandwidth to support the internet connectivity for the Nairobi Conference of the Parties. You were there. In 2008, I had another pleasure to work in Ghana for the beginning of the negotiations that are now moving. And $30,000 was put on the table to get 10 megabits of bandwidth. That was, in fact, excellent. High-quality bandwidth over the undersea fiber optic cable to which Ghana connects. And in 2009, going back to Kenya, looking at how we could have telepresence in the UN Environment Program headquarters in Nairobi. Nairobi just having gotten on the undersea fiber optic cable in July of this year, the cost is $12,000 for 10 megabits per month. Per month. In Germany, where I live, I pay $80 a month for 16 megabits of bandwidth. And so you begin to understand in that example the extremes that exist between developed and developing countries, and the challenges that developing countries face to even begin to think about the technologies that have been discussed here today. That just, if we go back to Graham's point about the first tier, the second tier, and the third tier, in Africa, we are looking at that first tier. and meeting just those first needs. And progress has been made, and you can see from these statistics, and they're not comparable and they're not in the same circumstances, and so you can't take me as doing an analysis of this, but they are ballpark figures and they give you the contrast. So costs are coming down, and that we have to see in Copenhagen to look at that important key deliverable, which is financing. But the other point I wanted to make is about communication. And what comes to my mind, and here's where I wanted to summarize, because His Excellency the Ambassador Montalvo spoke to this issue of what needs to be done. And I think it's a communication issue where ICT and climate change need to be speaking a similar language. And so the ICT sector needs to tell climate change what it needs to do. And based on that, the climate change negotiators can pick up how that factors in to any kind of agreement, whether that happens in Copenhagen as part of a political agreement or it happens later as part of the massive implementation that would be required remains to be seen. But providing guidance to governments on what role ICT sector can play. Right here in Barcelona, they are talking about a technology mechanism. What can ICT contribute to such a mechanism that looks at the full spectrum of the technological life cycle, R&D, selection, deployment, operation, decommissioning, replacement. And Mr. Takatami spoke about the Japanese investments. What are the economic incentives that are needed, that can come into the climate change negotiation that stimulate those investments in ICT and make that connection. Another which Mr. Somemura spoke to and Mr. Takatami, which is seeking to encourage international cooperation and standardized approaches. In climate change, efforts are made to do exactly that, but in the context of climate change. And doing so can increase things like long-term monitoring activities, to allow ICTs to introduce new technologies for such monitoring, and to provide a good feed of solid science on which decisions are made in climate change. Daniel Torres spoke about encouraging governments to adopt national and international policies. Monique Mesh spoke about the internet economy that seeks to speed economic growth and reduce energy intensity. What concretely allowing ICT to then develop and implement products and services that drive it. Enrique Ramos spoke about encouraging government investment in or incentives for research and development that can be used very practically in climate change in coordinated early warning systems for those countries most vulnerable to the impacts. And that we can look at finding, as our colleagues from Analysis Mason brought up, finding the business models that create economic incentives to lower costs for internet access in developing country. And another that came up in the discussions before this with my colleagues in the ITU is also encouraging all constituencies to talk to each other. That the member states of the ITU are ministries of telecommunication. The member states of the climate change process are ministries of the environment. And we can all encourage dialogue between departments to look at these issues in a more integrated way. Thank you.